Warning, this podcast may contain content that some may find triggering. Also, this podcast is in no way trying to glorify the life or lifestyle of the subject, but rather document it for educational, historical, and artistic purposes. A madam that was able to earn the heart of her town and operate freely without the worry of ever being shut down. Hello, my name is Summer, and this is Paying for It.
I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come on. I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come on. I'm gonna turn back my mattress and let you all my springs. I want you to find me, daddy, till the bell do ring. Oh, daddy, want you to shade and dry.
Welcome back to episode 6. I'm so happy to have you here. And yeah, welcome to February, even though this is the second week of February, but it is getting closer to Valentine's Day, so I thought we would kick off a little bit of love with a beloved madam. And her story is short and sweet, but I figured after Norma Wallace, we could use a little quickie, if you know what I mean. So let's, get into it. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful, wonderful Friday. I hope you guys' week went well. And yeah, what else is there to talk about? Oh my gosh, let me tell you. So I started this freaking, on Spotify, I started the subscription for my video versions, and I don't know how to change the pricing. Can you not change it? I just set it up and wasn't paying attention. That's just my luck, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie to you. So yeah, lovely for me, lovely for you. I don't know what I was saying. Anyways, that's where we're at right now. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to do something. Yeah, anyways, welcome to February. Welcome to the month of love. And yeah, you guys ready for this quickie? Grab yourself a mocktail, a coffee, a cocktail if you're of age, or if you are me, a little liquid IV, because I feel like staying hydrated. And I got a new flavor, and it's passion fruit, and it's delicious. I like watermelon and passion fruit, and I love liquid IV because it's salty. What does that say about me? I don't know. I love a salt and I love a spice. Okay, let's get into it. I think y'all are going to enjoy her little quickie story. And shall we dive in? Let's do it. Cheers! Oregon holds a special part in my heart because that's my home, baby. So it only makes sense for me to talk about a girl from the state I came from, and it only seems right to talk about a madam who seems to have embodied what I know to be true about the ladies of the Pacific Northwest. Pacific Northwest have caring hearts and strong wills. She didn't let what society deemed wrong allow it to hinder her life or the life of her girls. She had a big heart, not just for the girls she had working for her, but the ones around town who also needed a helping hand. Gaining the trust of the neighbors and the local law enforcement, allowing her to run a very successful business for over 40 years. Even, of course, when the world started needing someone to blame for their soldiers not being able to keep themselves clean, she was still able to be very successful and not have to worry about raids and being shut down because she gained the trust of her neighbors and her local law enforcement. Her story is very unique in a way that most ladies of the night are not. So I am very excited to introduce you to Stella Derby, the beloved Madam of Pendleton, Oregon. Stella Luella Richardson was born in 1902 in Walla Walla, Washington. We don't know much about Stella's earlier years, but we do know she did not graduate high school. Stella, though, was a hard worker, and we know before she made the move to Oregon, she worked as a maid cleaning houses, and she also cooked for Harvest. At the age of 26, Stella decided to move to Pendleton, Oregon. Okay, here is what you need to know about Pendleton, Oregon. In the 1890s, the transcontinental railroad was complete, which was totally great and all, but for the people who migrated here, of course, to help build it. Of course, we can't talk about history without mentioning that this was an incredibly racist time period. When the railroad was constructed, a ton of Chinese men migrated to help build it. When it was complete, of course, the U.S. no longer needed the thousands and thousands of Chinese workers. And sadly, Oregon was known to be incredibly racist to these Chinese men who found themselves there for the work. Pendleton, Oregon got to the point that it was so bad for the men that they couldn't leave their houses at night. This, though, didn't stop them, and eventually they formed underground tunnels to network and trade goods. So while that was going on, a local attorney in early September decided to start a rodeo to happen after harvest called the Pendleton Roundup. This harvest tradition would go on to become world famous and still continues today as the second oldest rodeo in the U.S. So the rodeo definitely allowed vice to start to grow within Pendleton, Oregon, bringing us to the 1920s, which seen the Prohibition era, allowing those underground tunnels to be utilized in a whole new way. Bootleggers took over the tunnels to use them to grow their distributing business. This just allowed the town to grow even more popular for those who loved vice. Specifically, Pendleton started to become known as a sex work center. Stella finds herself in Pendleton in 1928 at 26 years old. At this point, she has been married and divorced the year prior. Within the same year of moving to Pendleton, she opens her brothel, the Cozy Room, spelled C-O-S-Y. She named it and spelled it that way for reasons that she had. So the Cozy Room occupied the space on the second floor of the Monarch building located at 333-339 South Main Street. Now, as legend or history has it, before becoming a madam of her own house, Stella was never known to have been involved in the sex trade herself. However, that may not actually be the case. We will never know for sure, but we can call into question what we know about Stella up to this point. How would a single woman be able to afford property on a cook and maid salary? With that, though, it could also be possible that she was able to save some money. Maybe she came into some money somehow. It's not impossible, but for it to have happened, a lot of things had to have gone right in a time when things were not often going right, especially if you were a single woman. These tunnels now were pretty much the hub of vice, having gambling dens, liquor, opium dens, and brothels. However, for Stella, her house ran above grounds in the open. It didn't take long for the 32 steps leading up to her brothel to get the name of its own. If you were a local or visitor, you knew those 32 steps as 32 Steps to Heaven. Madam Stella became well known and loved within the Pendleton community. She was well known to be a very kind-spirited woman. She was known to give helping hands to anyone in need. She was always giving out food and clothing to those in need. She was also really, really good to her girls, encouraging them to pursue education, save money to obtain financial freedom, and strive for a higher social status. Because even though this town was well known for its vice, it still was very socially exclusive to those women within vice. Men could still come and go, none being angrier, but the women was still very shunned upon after joining vice. Not only did she encourage her girls to get to save money and become financially free, and to strive for higher education and higher social status. One thing that stood out about Stella was that she made sure her girls' spiritual needs were met at all times. Stella, nor any of her girls or any other girls working within the vice brothels in Pendleton were welcome in Pendleton beyond the red light district that they occupied. This again, of course, really isolated the ladies of vice, but allowed the men to travel within freely. Stella, though, was having none of that. So they weren't allowed in the churches, they weren't allowed to go worship, they weren't allowed any of that kind of freedom. But Stella, she was having none of that. And honestly, good for her. She made a small chapel within her brothel for the girls to worship. She would also invite traveling preachers who were known to come and give sermons as they passed through town. Stella Derby also ran a few other businesses within her town and vice. She had a cleaning business and owned the Striker machine, which was a traveling carnival. Stella also was known to bootleg alcohol and condoms, which condoms at the time were nearly impossible for single women to get at the time. So with her many businesses, people trusted her as a good, responsible businesswoman. They didn't just trust her with running a business, though, but a lot of people also trusted her with their secrets. So up until this point, brothels, which were licensed by the city as rooming houses, they were tolerated and operated freely, unofficially, of course. However, with World War II coming along, brought a ton of, you guessed it, military men into Pendleton. So the military were expanding and a lot of soldiers were stationed in Pendleton. As we are learning through this paying for it journey, the military and government love to blame the working girls for the rampant STI problem they have running through the men in the military. What I'm starting to learn, though, is that our working girls had a good head on them, and they were highly educated in keeping themselves clean and not spreading diseases. This was their job, their career, their work, their livelihood. So if they were to contract a STI, that was pretty much the end of their career. So a lot of these women, especially women working within brothels, were not stupid. They knew how to keep themselves protected from all these dirty men out here running around just willy-nilly. I was going to say something vertical, but I will refrain with myself. So what the heck was actually going on? If it was not the working girls, then who? Well, as I researched this story in particular, it's starting to become pretty clear that the issue really was the propaganda that the government was putting out, who pretty much claimed that whoever joined the army was like a God's gift to humanity. While I was listening to a podcast called The Old Pros, researching this episode, I learned about something I never heard about before. And that is the Khaki Wacky Girls. And I love the name. It's just fun to say Khaki Wacky. But sadly, these were young, uneducated, very horny girls from small towns who were servicing our servicemen without any protection. Never are STDs and STD hotspots ever actually directly related to a working girl. And the funny part is that to the government's own statistic, that the STI counts went way up anytime they would actually shut down brothels. So it's like they loved to put all of this blame in the eyes of the working girls, even though the working girls are not stupid, and they when you're in that environment, you understand the importance of keeping yourself clean. But when you're a young girl out in the middle of nowhere who's only really grown up with her brother and like whatever, they're young, and then they see all this propaganda that's like, if you know a military man, they are just sent from the heavens above, and we have to do everything to cherish them. And they're horny, we were all teenagers, we understand, it's just part of life. So it's like, they want a little lovin', they just didn't know because they just didn't have any education. So when these military men were coming into these small towns and laying on the charm, I'm sure highly thick, these girls didn't know. They just sadly were seduced by the military men themselves. And I have a feeling that even some of these military men didn't understand what STIs were, because it wasn't like at the time the military was educating them on how to keep themselves clean. They were just saying like, don't visit brothels because they are deceased women. I am gonna tell you, I'm gonna post a propaganda like flyer that was used during one of the Vice crackdowns, and it's like so hilarious because I'll just post it, so join, subscribe, and see this like hilarious freaking propaganda poster that they put out for working girls. And the propaganda that really makes you feel like they were the devils. Of course, they had to blame someone and they couldn't blame themselves, even though it really was their fault on not educating their men, not educating their young girls, not allowing the right information to be put out there. Anyways, back to Stella. She's over here keeping her girls clean, but the government can't blame their lack of education or providing protection, so they attempt to crack down on brothels and working girls. So Pendleton and the U.S. government tried to crack down on vice within Pendleton. They attempted to come up with wholesome activities to distract their soldiers from the plenty of brothels downtown, while simultaneously trying to raid the brothels within the red light district. This, though, was just a waste of time, because anytime a brothel was raided, they would all access and go underground to these tunnels, allowing them to escape the raid, any charges that may have been brought against them. On top of that, there was a real lack of will from the local police and judges. So while the federal government and army were trying really hard to crack down and act tough, it was a real waste of effort on their part, not having the local lawmen on their side, basically allowing Stella to casually keep her cozy room out in the open, already gaining most of the trust of the town and gaining good relationships with the local law enforcement and judges. So she was able to survive this moral panic. Even many of the good Christian women who really weren't fond of the houses within their town, none of them ever went after Stella. She was loved and very well protected within her community for the strong connections she had built. So Pendleton really had no control over vice within their city. So by 1942, most of the soldiers in the area knew that all roads led to Pendleton for those seeking recreation. And I love that. It's like I can just see I could just see military men being like, station me at Pendleton, station me. Because it's like you probably either wanted Pendleton, Texas, or New Orleans, right? Like, I'm sure we're going to find more places that were like you also want to be, but I'm sure some of these Oregon, Oregon, New Orleans, Texas, 3 major cities if you were in the military that you most likely wanted to be stationed at. Around this time, Stella Derby gets married for the second time in 1946. She marries Royal Jean Eiriker, a World War II veteran and laborer. Stella, though, never changed her last name in her marriages. Royal would also go on to move into Stella's at 337 Main Street. He worked as a painter and owned a janitorial service business. The couple, though, divorced in 1957 for cruelty. Royal Jean proved to be incredibly abusive to Stella. However, her heart shows in this as well, because even though they divorced for him being a damn asshole and not being able to keep his hands off of her, she still allows him to remain and live within her property, possibly as a boarder, but maybe just there, Which, I don't know if that's something out of the kindness of her heart or if she was just there was no other option. I'm not sure, but she allowed him to stay. Stella goes on to run her cozy room business very successfully in the same building for 40 years. She normally ran 6 girls out of her house, doggies. And she will decide to retire and close her cozy room in 1967, where she moved back to Walla Walla, Washington, and lived a very respectable life and retired, most likely very, very wealthy. Stella Derby passes away in October 1977. So honestly, what a queen. What a queen of Oregon. I'm going to just let her be an Oregon girl because she was born in Washington and she does die in Washington. But you know what? She makes her life in Oregon, So we accept her as an Oregon girl. She was unique in this way because she really did go on to help a lot of people within her town. She was known to give out food, clothing, anything. If someone needed help, she was known to help them. And that's really why she was able to keep the cozy room above ground, out and about, no worries. In that she had no worries. She was like, they're not going to try to shut me down. She had too many secrets on too many powerful people, but also too many people owed her too many favors. I'm sure some of the good Christian women also owed her favors. So that's why they never went after her. And she was she was a woman who never really got socially outcasted because of how kind she was, I guess. The cozy room would eventually go on to be bought by Pam Sevier. She would restore the brothel and open it up as a working girls' hotel. Sadly, she passed away after a battle with cancer. The Monarch Building is recognized on the National Register of Historical Places. So the hotel is still within and is so after the passing of Pam, the Working Girls Hotel is bought and is still owned by Pendleton Underground Tours because those tunnels are still there today and you can go and take tours of them, which is so awesome. And I never heard of this when I lived in Oregon, and I can't wait to go back to take a tour of these awesome tunnels and just see. Also, I need to stay in this hotel. Like, hello, it's made for me. I need to go stay in there. The underground tours is actually ran by Pam's daughter. And in 2014, a bronze statue of Stella was sculpted by a local art teacher and placed at the museum's entrance. So she is still very loved within this community and still a part of their history, not written out, which is so unique to a working girl's history. I love that, honestly. The only reason that Stella was able to operate in open without the fear that she was going to constantly be raided was because she made good connections within her community and the local law enforcement and judges. She knew that if she was not with her local community, you wouldn't last long. She would have never been as successful as she was had she not earned the trust of her neighbors. She was able to stay active for 40 years due to the many favors she was owed, as she was often helping out those who were in need, but also those who found themselves in trouble and needed help. We don't know her reason why she decided to enter the sex trade, especially if she never actually participated within the sex trade. But we do know now she did it out of her own free will, as she bought the house, hired her girls, and survived and killed it within the game for 40 years. So Stella is our badass queen of the week, of course. And yeah, that is pretty much Stella's story as what we know of today. There's not a ton of information out there about Stella or the secrets she had, but I bet you those secrets were just as juicy as you could imagine. And I love the fact that anytime I'm researching one story, it leads me to a different story, which leads me to a different story, and how beautiful most of these stories are. It's weird that our history makes us believe these were all troubled women, troubled souls, troubled whatever, and that no one ever chose to join this field. But Stella proves them wrong yet again. If she never ever participated in sex work ever, then she did this because she wanted to. Maybe it was because she felt that she could provide a safe environment to some of these girls, provide some help getting some higher educations, but she never ever looked down on the girls. And as you see, some of the town may have looked down on the girls, but she did not allow them to be treated any differently, and she took care of them, and that's really, really, really nice. So yeah, that is what we know of Stella and our beloved Oregon queen. I hope to one day be able to go and visit the Working Girls Hotel and take a tour of their underground tours. It is now officially on my bucket list, like a lot of other places. Yeah, so that is our quickie of the week, and I hope you enjoyed listening to Stella's story, and I hope you get a kick out of giggling about all those khaki wacky girls. Yeah, so that is that for this week. I hope you had a wonderful Friday. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night and the rest of your weekends. And yeah, I hope you consider subscribing or at least liking and leaving a review, following me on Twitter and TikTok, or whatever you fancy, really. And yeah, that is it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Friday, good weekends, and I will see you next week. Oh, next week's the real Valentine's episode, and it's a good one. It's a good one. So, see you then. It's a date. Goodbye. I said it weird again. I don't know why. Bye.
I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come on. That. I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come on. want you to shake